What's up, everyone? Jay here from Tap and Turn Gaming, coming at you today with an EDH deck tech. So today's deck tech was a request that was made to us by one of our viewers. That viewer goes by the name of Sebsations on YouTube. So he originally requested a Reanimator deck built around Obnixilis of the Black Oath, which did come in one of the Commander precons, the monocolored ones. He had explained to us that he just gotten back into the game and had picked up the mono black precon as kind of a starting point and wanted to get into Commander. He also did say later on that he would prefer to run Sheoldred the Whispering One as the commander of the deck. So that's actually what we went ahead and did here. Was made a mono black Reanimator deck built around Sheoldred the Whispering One. So, Sebsations, I hope you enjoy this video, and everybody else watching, I hope you enjoy it as well. So let's kick things off and take a look at the general, Sheoldred the Whispering One. She's a 7-cost 6/6 with Swamp Walk. She's a pretty well-known card. If you're playing black, you're probably playing her. She is kind of an expensive card at the moment at like $18, but that's solely because of Commander. I think that's really the only place that you really see her played nowadays. Excuse me. But, you know, a lot of people know what she does. If you don't, like I said, 6/6 with Swamp Walk for 7. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. So you get a free res out of your graveyard straight to the board every turn, and then on each of your opponent's turns, they have to sacrifice a creature away. So not only does that benefit us, obviously, with the first ability where we get the reanimation, the other ability where our opponents have to sacrifice things, gets goodies into their graveyard, potentially for us to abuse with some of our reanimation spells that we have in the deck. So, I mean, that's more or less what Sheoldred does in a nutshell. So let's take a look at the rest of the deck. First off, we'll start with the land base. Pretty basic, nothing crazy, because it is a monocolored deck. We run a Baron Moor, basically just there as a additional way to draw a card. You know, we can cycle it away for 1 black to draw a card. Bajuka Bog is kind of a double-edged sword, I guess, for us. You know, generally we want the graveyard to be stocked on our side, obviously, and sometimes on our opponent's side, because we do have cards that will let us rip cards out of their graveyard. But, you know, if you absolutely need to exile somebody's graveyard, maybe they're playing a Reanimator-style deck, or just doing some sort of mean shenanigans, and maybe you don't have your reanimation pieces live on the board or in your hand, you have access to this if you absolutely need to exile somebody's graveyard. You have Cabal Coffers, just an auto-include in a mono-black deck will generate you boatloads of black mana for each swamp you control. Crypt of Agadeem is kind of the same thing, except it will generate you black mana for each black creature card in your graveyard. Seeing as this is a mono-black deck, I felt like it fit right in. Next we have High Market. We can add 1 colorless to our mana pool, or we can sacrifice a creature to gain 1 life. Basically, they're just as a free sack outlet for us every turn. Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. We can tap it for 1 colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it, choose a color, obviously in this deck going to be black, and add to our mana pool an amount of mana of that color equal to our devotion to that color. So devotion is however many of the chosen mana symbols among permanents you control on the board. So if we have 10 black mana symbols among all the permanents we have on the board, this will generate us 10 black mana. Polluted Mire, just another cycling land for us to have access to more card draw if we need it. Rogue's Passage to make a creature unblockable. Then we run 28 Swamps and an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which is nice with our general because she has Swamp Walk. So if our opponent's not playing black, this will make all of their lands swamps, so that Sheoldred can Swamp Walk all over them. So that is the land base. Like I said, pretty basic, nothing too crazy. Next, I guess we'll take a look at our enchantment package. Seeing as it's a reanimator style deck, we run Animate Dead, which basically brings a creature out of any graveyard back to the board with this attached to it, and it gives the enchanted creature a -1/-0. So, just a nice cheap spell that we can use to rip something out of any graveyard. Black Market, whenever a creature dies, we put a charge counter on this, and then at the beginning of our pre-combat main phase, we get black mana equal to the number of charge counters on it. So as things die, this racks up counters. During our first main phase, we get boatloads of black mana, which is nice. Dictate of Erebos, just Grave Pact with Flash, so whenever we lose a guy, everybody else loses a guy. Grave Betrayal, whenever a creature we don't control dies, we return it to the battlefield under our control with a 1/1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step, and that creature also becomes a black zombie. So as things die that we don't control, we get it on our side of the board at the end of the next turn. And it gets a +1/+1 counter. Grave Pact, same thing as Dictate of Erebos, just costs 1 less but doesn't have Flash. Palace Siege, we can either choose Khans or Dragons for this. If you choose Khans, you get a creature back to your hand every upkeep from your graveyard. If you choose Dragons, on your upkeep, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Most of the time, I would choose Khans for this to get the creature recursion. And lastly, Phyrexian Arena, just for some card draw. Next, we'll take a look at our instants. We run a Grim Return, so the next time a creature would go to the graveyard, we choose a creature. When it goes to the yard this turn, we return it to the battlefield under our control. Hero's Downfall, just some spot removal for us on a creature or planeswalker. Malicious Affliction will kill any non-black creature, and if we kick off Morbid, we can basically copy this spell, I believe. Yes, so whenever you cast it, if a creature died this turn, you may copy it and choose new targets for the copy. So a spell that will essentially kill 2 creatures for 2 mana is pretty good. Murder, just unconditional removal on any creature, so that's always nice. Scour from Existence, because mono black is very bad at getting rid of artifacts and enchantments. So this is in there just for access to, get rid of that problem artifact or that problem enchantment or whatever it may be. Then we have Wretched Confluence, a 5 mana instant that lets us choose any of these 3 things, and we can choose the same thing more than once. Target player draws a card and loses 1 life, or target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, or return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Just lots of cool things, and, like I said, we can choose the same thing more than once, so if we wanted to, we could draw 3 cards and lose 3 life, so on and so on. Alright, next we'll look at our Planeswalkers. We run Liliana of the Dark Realms because she will let us hit our land drops every turn with her +1. Then her minus, we can give something a +X/+X or -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of swamps we control. Really good for those indestructible creatures if we need to get them off the board by giving them a -/-. Or, we can pump one of our own creatures and get in for more damage. And then her ultimate is you get an emblem with swamps you control, have tap to add 4 black to your mana pool, so that's nothing to scoff at. Then we have Obnixilis of the Black Oath, because Subsations wanted the deck originally built around this guy, and he obviously has access to it right now, so I figured I'd throw it in the deck. He can make you, +2, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain life equal to the life lost this way. -2, put a 5/5 black demon creature with flying onto the battlefield, you lose 2 life. And then his ultimate is you get an emblem with pay 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature, you gain X life, and draw X cards, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. Then we have Obnixilis Reignited, 5 cost black planeswalker with 5 loyalty, +1, draw a card, lose a life, -3, destroy any creature, -8, target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life, so that could be a win condition on its own. Alright, next up we'll take a look at our sorceries. We run Beacon of Unrest because we're trying to go with a reanimator theme, so this will let us resurrect any artifact or creature in any graveyard onto our side of the board. Buried Alive lets us search our library for 3 creatures and put them into our graveyard, then shuffle our deck. So if we have a reanimation spell in our hand and we want a specific creature to use it on that's not in our graveyard or in our hand or on the board, we can rip it out of our deck, toss it in the graveyard, and then use that spell on it to get it out of the graveyard and onto the board. Then we have Life's Finale, a sweeper forest that destroys all creatures. And then we can search an opponent's library for 3 creature cards and put them into their graveyard. So just a double whammy for us here. Not only will it wipe the board, but it will stock our opponent's graveyard with more goodies that we could potentially use against them. Then we have Necromantic Selection, a 7-cost black sorcery that destroys all creatures, then return a creature card put into a graveyard this way under your control, or to the battlefield under your control, and it becomes a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types, and then you exile the spell. I don't particularly like cards that exile themselves, but I felt like this really fit the theme of the deck. Wipes the board and then lets us resurrect the biggest creature that we want in any graveyard onto our side of the board. Then we have Profane Command. We can choose 2 of the following modes for double black and X. Target player loses X life, or return a creature card with convert a mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or target creature gets -X, or up to X target creatures gain fear. So lots of options there. Then we have Rise of the Dark Realms, which brings every creature card in every graveyard onto the board on our side. So basically a Liliana Vess ultimate on a spell. Then we have Ruinous Path, just a spot removal card for us, destroys any creature or planeswalker. And then Victimize allows us to choose 2 target creature cards in our graveyard, and then we sacrifice a creature. Then we return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped, so some more reanimation for us. Next up, we'll look at the 7 artifacts that we run. First up is Altar of Dementia, a 2-cost artifact where we can sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their deck into their graveyard. So, we could sacrifice one of our creatures away that we maybe have already used that, gave us an enter the battlefield effect. We don't need it anymore. Use it to stockpile the opponent's graveyard. Ashnod's Altar. Everybody probably knows what this does. 3-cost artifact. Sack a creature, get 2 colorless mana in your mana pool. It does combo very well with a card that we're going to look at in a second. Lightning Greaves, everybody knows what that does. The equipped creature gets Haste and Shroud, just there to protect our general or a creature that we want to have stick around. Here's Nim Deathmantle, which is what combos very well with Ashnod's Altar and any creature that comes in with at least 2 other creatures. The deck tech that Derek did earlier in the week for Geth Lord of the Vault really did kind of showcase the power of this combo with many, many creatures that come in with at least 2 other creatures with them. I decided to not really pack a lot of those creatures into this deck because I didn't really want to kind of copy where Derek went with that deck, but it's just really good recursion on a colorless card. So the equipped creature gets +2/+2, has Intimidate, and is a black zombie. That's all fine and good. But whenever a non-token creature is put into our graveyard, we can pay 4 colorless. If we do, we return that card to the battlefield attached to this. So, obviously with this and Ashnod's Altar, if you had something like a Grave Titan, which we do have in this deck, play the Grave Titan, he brings in 2 zombies, sacrifice one of the zombies and the Grave Titan to Ashnod's Altar to get 4 colorless mana. Use that 4 colorless mana on the trigger on this to bring the Grave Titan back to the board, and now he comes in with 2 more zombies, and you've netted 1 extra creature token. So with that, you have unlimited creature token production and unlimited colorless mana, basically. Anyways, moving on, we have Scythe of the Wretched. The equipped creature gets +2/+2, and whenever a creature dealt damage by equipped creature this turn goes to the graveyard, we return it to the board on our side, and this gets immediately attached to it. Then we have Soul Ring. Everybody knows what Soul Ring does. Soul Ring is Soul Ring. Next up, we have Whip of Erebos, which is a 4-cost enchantment artifact that's legendary. It gives our entire team lifelink, which is what I really like about it. It does give us a way to reanimate something out of our graveyard right to the board, but it gets exiled at the beginning of the next end step, or if it would leave the battlefield, it gets exiled. So I'm not a huge fan of exiling my own things, but the fact that this gives your whole team lifelink, I felt like kind of deserved a spot in the deck because we do have some things that will make us lose life. So this will kind of offset that a little bit. Or if you have a really large army on the board, it will offset it a lot. Alright, and lastly, we will take a look at the creature base, which is obviously the heftiest portion of the deck. So we're going to start off with Archfiend of Depravity. He's a 5-cost, 5/4 flyer. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures he or she controls, then sacrifices the rest. So it kind of keeps your opponents in check. If they're going really wide with creatures, this will keep them in check and basically keep them down to at least 2 creatures when it comes to their end step. So not only will that keep their board state in check, it will also fill up their graveyard for you to potentially use things out of it against them. Then we have Ashling the Extinguisher, a 4-cost 4/4. When she deals damage to a player, combat damage, choose target creature that player controls, and then he or she sacrifices that creature. So I like this because it gets around like indestructible creatures like Avacyn, Angel of Hope, or any of the other myriad of indestructible creatures that are out there. So it's not going to destroy the creature, you're going to target it, and then that creature is going to get sacrificed. Then we have Big Game Hunter, 3-cost 1/1. When he comes in, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater, and it can't be regenerated. So, just destroy one of their big threats. Then we have Bloodgift Demon, which is basically a Phyrexian Arena on a 5/4 flying body. So not only can we smack in with it for 5 in the air, we can draw that extra card every turn. Then we have Bone Shredder. It's a 3-cost 1/1 flyer with Echo for 2 and a black. When it comes in, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. So it's basically a terror on a 1/1 flying body. A lot of the low casting cost creatures in this deck, I decided to go with creatures that come in and destroy other creatures to kind of, keep the opponent's board state in check, and also, be able to get, creatures out there pretty early on our side of the board and fill up our opponent's graveyard as well, so that we have possible options to use against them. Then we have Cryptghast, a 4-cost 2/2. With Extort, so whenever you cast a spell, you can pay a hybrid white or black. If you do, you drain somebody for 1 and you gain that much life. Then basically why we have it in here really is for the mana doubling on our swamps. So whenever we tap a swamp for mana, we add another black to our mana pool. We have Doom Necromancer because it's a Reanimator style deck. So he's a 3-cost 2/2, pay a black, tap it, and sacrifice it to return target creature card from your graveyard to play. And then we have Extractor Demon, 6-cost 5/5 flyer. Whenever another creature leaves the battlefield, we can have target player mill the top 2 cards of the library. So obviously we're probably going to choose our opponents with this. We could choose ourselves to stockpile our own graveyard, but more often than not, you probably want to hit your opponent's deck. But you do have the option of hitting your own as well. So we like this because it beats in the air for 5, and it stockpiles graveyards. We have Fleshbag Marauder, basically just there so that we can get a sacrifice trigger for every player. So when it comes in, each player sacrifices a creature. Gatekeeper of Malakir, a 2-cost 2/2 with Kicker for 1 black, and if we kick it, target player sacrifices a creature. And we have Ghoulcaller Jisa, which comes in the mono black precon deck. So Sebsations already has access to this, and it's a really good card. 5-cost 3/4, where we can pay a black and tap it and sacrifice another creature to put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. So, if we resurrect something out of the yard and we get an effect from it and we no longer need it, sacrifice it away to this to get an army of 2/2 zombies. Grave Titan, because he's a token-generating machine and he's a creature that will combo with the Ashnod's Altar Nim Deathmantle thing that I mentioned earlier. Harvester of Souls, a 5/5 with Death Touch is nothing to scoff at, and whenever another non-token creature dies, we draw a card. So some nice card draw there for us. Hell's Caretaker, a nice little reanimation creature to have on your side of the board. So on your upkeep, you can tap him and sacrifice a creature to bring any creature card from your graveyard back to the board. You can only do that during your upkeep, but still it's a very powerful effect. Then we have Ink Eyes, Servant of Oni, 6 cost, 5/4. That we can regenerate for 1 and a black. When it hits a player, we can resurrect a creature out of their graveyard onto our side of the board, so that's why we really have it in here. And it has ninjutsu, so we can basically swap this with a unblocked attacking creature that we have, so we can kind of sneak it in and be tricky with it. If we swing in with a 2/2 zombie token and our opponent's like, yeah, I could take 2 damage, then we can ninjutsu this in for 3 and 2 black and make Ink Eyes take the place of that 2/2 zombie so we can, be tricksy. Then we have Limdul the Necromancer, because he just fits right into a Reanimator style deck. 7 cost, 4/4. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, we can pay 1 and a black. If we do, we get it back to our side of the board, and it becomes a zombie in addition to its other types, and we can pay 1 and a black to regenerate target zombie. Magus of the Coffers is basically a Cabal Coffers on a 4/4 body. Merciless Executioner is basically a Fleshbag Marauder, so gets us another table-wide sacrifice trigger. Mikaeus the Unhallowed, excuse me. My laptop mouse is a little touchy. Mikaeus the Unhallowed, 6 cost, 5/5 with Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to you, it gets destroyed, but why we really like him is because whenever a non-human creature we control... I'm sorry. Wow, I can't... Let me start over with that. Other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. So whenever one of our non-human creatures dies, it comes back to the board with a +1/+1 counter on it if it didn't already have one. Then we have Neferaz, Overlord of Grixis, a 6 cost, 5/5 flyer with Exalted, so if he attacks alone or any other creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And when he attacks alone, defending player sacrifices a creature. So, we like it because he'll make our opponent sacrifice something, and if they only have 1 creature on the board, it goes away if we attack alone with this guy. Necrotal, a 4 cost, 2/1 with First Strike. When he comes in, he terrors, basically. Then we have Ogre Slumlord, a 5 cost, 3/3. Whenever a non-token creature dies, we get a 1/1 black rat onto the board, and rats we control have Death Touch. So, things are going to die quite frequently, generally in EDH anyway. We do have lots of ways to kill things in this deck, so every time something dies, we get a 1/1 black rat, whether it's our opponent's things or our things. And those rats are basically little mini kill spells. So that's really nice. Overseer of the Damned, 7 cost, 5/5 flyer. When he enters the battlefield, we destroy target creature. Just unconditional creature destruction is always nice. And then whenever a non-token creature an opponent's control dies, we get a 2/2 black zombie onto our side of the board tapped. We have Phyrexian Delver, a 3/2 for 5. When he comes in, we return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield, and we lose life equal to its converted mana cost. But, if it's something that's going to swing the tide of battle for us, I'd gladly lose the life, as long as it's not going to kill me, to bring it back to the board. Then we have Puppeteer Clique, a 5 cost, 3/2 flyer. When it comes in, we resurrect a creature from an opponent's graveyard onto our side of the board. And this has Persist, So when it dies, we bring it back to the board with a -1/-1 counter on it if it didn't already have a -1/-1 counter on it. Then we have Scion of Darkness, a 8-cost 6/6 with trample, but when it hits a player, we resurrect one of their creatures out of their graveyard onto our side of the board. And the fact that he has trample means that he'll probably hit. So you'll be able to rip something out of their graveyard. Then we have Shadowborn Demon, a 5-cost 5/6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-demon creature. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, if there are fewer than 6 creature cards in your graveyard, sacrifice a creature. So that's not really a terrible thing, because if we don't meet that stipulation, we can sacrifice himself and then maybe resurrect him later on out of our graveyard and destroy something else with him. Then we have Shriekmaw, basically a terror on a body that we can evoke. So if we cast it for its evoke cost, it comes in, triggers its ability, and then immediately gets sacrificed. But if it sticks on the board, it's a 3/2 with fear, so that's not terrible either. Then we have Slum Reaper, which is basically just a bigger flesh bag / merciless executioner. He's a 4/2 for 4. When he comes in, each player sacrifices a creature. Then we have Solemn Simulacrum. Everybody knows what he does. When he comes in, you search for a basic and put it onto the board tapped. When he dies, you draw a card. And then lastly, Stronghold Assassin is a 3-cost 2/1 where you can tap him and sacrifice a creature to destroy target non-black creature. So that about rounds out the deck, guys. So, I feel like we got some pretty good synergies in the deck. We have some things that produce us tokens like Grave Titan. We also have many ways to kill things. Whether it be via sacrifice or just straight up destruction. Like Archfiend of Depravity, Ashling the Extinguisher, Bone Shredder, Fleshbag Marauder. Gatekeeper of Malakir, the list goes on, Merciless Executioner, Necrotal. So we have lots of ways to kill things, and we also have, some spot removal as well that will allow us to deal with creatures. So, the aim of this deck, is to really just keep the board under control on our opponent's side via sacrifice or, using cards to kill other creatures. And then stockpiling graveyards so that we can potentially, use stuff from our opponent's graveyard against them, or we can just use some of our own tools again and again and again. So that's really just the aim of the deck. Just a fun mono black deck. I feel like that could do pretty well. I mean, Sheoldred does cost a lot at 7 mana to cast, and if she goes to the graveyard. If you put her in the command zone instead, she's going to cost 2 more mana to cast the next time, and then 2 more after that. But you could just keep her in your graveyard and then use some of your reanimation spells and or permanents to get her back to the board, to get her back online. So, overall, I think it's a pretty balanced deck. I feel like it'd be a pretty fun deck to play. Definitely has some nice little synergies with it, and always, ripping something out of your opponent's graveyard and using it against them is always really fun to do. So, that about wraps up the deck, guys. So, one thing that I did forget to mention at the top of the video was that Sebsations did request that this deck be at a budget of $250 or to stay under that amount. This deck, according to TCG Player Mid, comes in at $222.69. That does include the cost of Sheoldred, because I know he said he doesn't currently have one. But, obviously some of these cards were included in the Commander Mono Black Precon, so those are just fewer cards that you need to purchase for the deck that you can use to purchase some of the more expensive cards in the deck, like the General, for instance, because she costs about $18. So, that about rounds it up, guys. So leave me some comments of what you thought. Thumbs up the video if you did enjoy it. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, Tap and Turn Gaming, please crush that subscribe button. We really do appreciate it. So thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you later.